What is Nintendo's big game for the Nintendo Switch this holiday that they're hiding from us? Well, if you take a look at one specific developer's kind of track record and release history when it comes to their games, I think we can make a pretty educated guess. Let's talk about it. Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games, and today I wanted to discuss Nintendo's big holiday game for the Nintendo Switch. I know there's a lot of trepidation right now of people thinking there won't be a big game for the Switch this year. I think that's foolish. They always have a big game, even if it's something that maybe isn't for everyone. They usually have one or two multi-million sellers for the Nintendo Switch releasing in the holiday season. Now, there's a couple things I want to bring up in this video that I think would make great candidates for a big holiday release from Nintendo. In fact, I did a video last week where I discussed most of these, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth on each individual game. So starting off, and we'll save that big one for last. Starting off, though, Metroid Prime 4, I don't know if it's Hopium at this point, or as Andres Restart would call it, Hopium Maximum, but I do feel like it's time for Metroid Prime 4, right? Like, we've been waiting for this game for so long. If it is a Switch 1 game and not being saved for Switch 2, I would make the argument this year is really the final time to release it, and that would make sense as a big holiday game. It's not going to sell, 10 million units, or maybe it will, hopefully, but given that Metroid Dread released in October, given that Metroid Prime games traditionally release in November, I think a holiday release for Metroid Prime 4 propped up as one of their big games that they advertise alongside the Switch in Christmas just makes a lot of sense. I really hope that does happen because I want this game to just, finally release. I'm tired of waiting for it at this point. So that's definitely one option. However, I don't really think that would be the only game that Nintendo releases on the Switch this year, or at least in terms of major holiday games. I do think they'll sprinkle it with a couple of maybe games that we're not as excited for, but games that will certainly sell a lot of copies, like a Mario Party, a Mario and Sonic game or something from Sega. That would be interesting to see come back. It's been a while since we had one of those. But I do think there will be at least one more game on top of Metroid Prime 4 that the core Nintendo audience would be excited for. Now, one of the other titles of the three that I want to mention in today's video, this is my Hopium Maximum. I don't know if I truly believe this is going to happen at this point, but I do think it's weird how Pokemon Legends ZA was announced. I think it's weird that they would go 2 full calendar years without a release, especially considering how low sales must have been for them in 2023, given that Detective Pikachu Returns bombed. So I do think there is still a sliver of a chance that we are getting some sort of mainline Pokemon game this year. If not that, though, definitely a spinoff. I would say one of those almost has to happen this year. It'd be very weird for the Pokemon Company to go that long without releasing a retail premium price game that they will make a lot of money on. My gut is still leaning towards an Ilka remake of Black and White or Johto games, Gold and Silver, one of the two. Given how big Ilka is, I wasn't aware how big Ilka is. They have 400 employees or 300 employees or something like that, which is pretty big for a developer like Ilka. Now, they just released Sandland. Last year, they released the One Piece Odyssey game. But outside of that, they mostly do a lot of support work. But this year, we did see that Pokemon Company kind of founded this new Pokemon Works subdivision, which is in the same building as Ilka's offices. So I think it's safe to say that the Ilka and Pokemon Company partnership is here to stay. It's just a matter of when we see another game from them. I do think it's possible, though, that for whatever weird marketing reason to kind of make fans happy when Legends ZA was announced, I think it's possible they specifically didn't announce a game because they want to do it closer to release after the reception of Diamond and Pearl remakes. I think there's a multitude of reasons you can kind of point to and theorize as to why they wouldn't have announced a mainline Pokemon game at that point. And actually, most Pokemon remakes have been announced in May. Normally Pokemon remakes are announced a little bit closer. Now, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were announced next to Legends Arceus, but I would make the argument maybe that was because they weren't sure how fans would react to Legends Arceus. Because if you look at the other recent remakes, or let's say lesser titles, not the new generation, right? Those are always announced in January, February, around Pokemon Day or on Pokemon Day. But the upgraded versions, the remakes, those are usually announced more than halfway through the year, about halfway through the year. So recent examples of that being Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, those were announced in May. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were announced in June of 2017. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire were announced in May as well. Whereas X and Y was announced in January. Sun and Moon were announced in February. Sword and Shield were announced in February. Normally the lesser title, the B team game from Game Freak, ends up being announced around the halfway point through the year. So I have not given up hope for a mainline Pokemon game this year, I will be honest. I do think it would be a game developed by Ilka, which, you know, take it or leave it. I know a lot of people, myself included, aren't too happy with how they handled Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but given that, you know, this would be their second time taking on a Pokemon project, I think it's possible they would, you know, certainly increase the quality of this release. Now, that is not what we're here to talk about today, though. The main reason I wanted to make this video is really go in depth on what I truly do believe will be the main holiday game. I think Metroid Prime 4 is a given. I really do think that game will release. Pokemon, I'm less confident in, but I do think it's possible. But this other game, I have fully convinced myself is going to happen. And of course, it could end up not happening. In fact, I don't even truly want it to happen. But if you look at this developer and what they've released from the past decade, I've done the research on how many games they release like per year normally. They are overdue for a new release, and that is Omega Force. Now, for the past, 2 years, I've been kind of speculating and hoping for a Xenoblade Chronicles Warriors. I think out of every Nintendo IP, now that we've had 2 Zelda Warriors games, now that we've had 2 Fire Emblem Warriors, Xenoblade Chronicles feels like the natural next step, and I still would prefer that, and I still really hope that does happen. However, more business speak here, or more, analytical thinking, a new Hyrule Warriors makes so much sense this year for so many reasons. So starting off, let's take a little bit of a look at Omega Force's development history over the years. So I've counted how many games they release per year. Now, in some of these cases, these are ports, these are remasters, that kind of thing, right? But for the past 10 years, they have released a minimum of 2 games a year. They have nothing announced this year. So in 2014, they released a staggering 8 games. 2015, 6 games. 2016, 7 games. And then from there, it kind of went down quite a bit. They focused a little bit more on quality over quantity. I would argue the Warriors games have only gotten better, in my opinion. In 2017, they released 2 games. In 2018, they released 4 games. That was, of course, when Hyrule Warriors Legends came out, though, so one of those was definitely a port. 2019 had 2 games. 2020 had 3 games, and all 3 of those were bangers. That was Persona 5 Strikers, One Piece Pirate Warriors 4, as well as Age of Calamity. All 3 of which are some of the best Warriors games they've ever made. 2021 had 2 games, 2022 had 2 games. Once again, those are 2 Warriors games in 2022. That was Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, as well as Token Rambu Warriors, and that was the last Warriors game. In 2023, they released Wild Hearts, which was a Monster Hunter clone, as well as that Fate Samurai Remnant game, which I think I haven't seen too much of that game. I think it is arguably kind of Warriors adjacent, but it is not officially a Musou release from Omega Force. So, we are in a scenario right now where it has been over 2 years just about since they released a Warriors game. This developer that typically releases multiple games a year has not announced the game for 2024. Usually Koei Tecmo isn't, shy to announcing games very early, but you know who does like announcing games close to release? Nintendo. If there is a Warriors game that they are collaborating with Nintendo, obviously Nintendo will kind of want to manage that announcement, have it be either the opening or a closer of a Nintendo Direct. And I gotta be honest, no game makes more sense for this year than a Hyrule Warriors, Tears of the Kingdom, The Imprisoning War, that kind of thing. There's usually a quota that Nintendo meets of 1 Zelda game per year. We do not have that game yet, and while it's not impossible they would go another year without a game, 2022 is the only year without a Zelda game since, I don't know, 2010, I want to say? It's been a long time. Of course, that's including Hyrule Warriors and Hyrule Warriors Legends and Definitive Edition, but usually, the point is, usually there is 1 game with a link on the box art, basically, every single year. And I think a Warriors game makes so much sense because while a lot of people are getting hyped up for the Switch 2, and, we want to see all those exciting new exclusives for that console, we don't want to see Ocarina of Time remake for the Switch, I don't think. I think most people would rather have that be saved for Switch 2. Even a 2D Zelda, which I have theorized would release this year, that is something I think a lot of people would rather save for the Switch 2. That's a system seller. I don't know if another Warriors game is a system seller. So in terms of a multi-million seller that Nintendo can release on the Switch this year, that would drum up some excitement, but it is kind of just cash in your check, right? They're just doing what they gotta do to get another game out that sells, a couple million copies. Hyrule Warriors Tears of the Kingdom makes so much sense. They already have all of these assets running in the Age of Calamity art style, or the Breath of the Wild art style with Age of Calamity. All they really need to do over at Omega Force is add more characters and a new story, and then they're done, and that's it, and it will sell so well, because if you don't know, Age of Calamity is by far the best-selling Warriors game. It's not even close. As of January 2022, that game sold over 4 million copies, making it far and away the best-selling Warriors game. So all of these things combined in conjunction here are definitely leading me to believe that we will get a new Hyrule Warriors this year, and that will be one of our big games this year. Maybe Metroid Prime 4 actually does end up selling better, like I would hope so. But in terms of like the big like mass market appeal game that Nintendo releases this year from one of their major IP, a new Zelda game, Tears of the Kingdom sold very well. It makes sense to capitalize on that excitement with another Warriors game. It'd be pretty easy to put together, I imagine, over at Omega Force. This just makes a lot of sense to me. They haven't released a Warriors game since 2022. They haven't announced any games at all for this year. A developer that releases typically at least 2 games a year, sometimes more than that. I feel like the pieces are lined up right now for some sort of new Nintendo Warriors crossover, at least minimum that. Like, at the very least, I think there will be a Warriors crossover from Nintendo this year. I would prefer Xenoblade Chronicles, but given how well Age of Calamity did, it makes sense that both Koei Tecmo and Nintendo would greenlight another Hyrule Warriors next from Koei Tecmo. Like, that just makes so much sense, especially as a late, life cycle release for the Nintendo Switch. Like, that just makes so much sense to me. So we'll have to wait and see. I do think there will be some exciting stuff this year. I am still holding on for dear life to that notion that there will be some exciting games this year. I personally don't love Age of Calamity. It's one of the weaker Warriors games in my opinion, but I know I am in the minority there. I know a lot of people really, really love that game. So I think an Imprisoning War, prequel, in air quotes there, to Tears of the Kingdom would be really exciting. I think a lot of people would really enjoy that, and it would definitely help fill out the holiday season with a game that's, I think, Warriors games kind of have a stigma. Yeah, the people that don't like Warriors games are never going to be happy with another Warriors game. But given how well Age of Calamity did, 4 million copies is not a number to scoff at. I think it makes sense that that is what we end up getting this year as our big holiday game, or at least as one of our big holiday games next to either Metroid Prime 4 or a Pokemon remake, or, something along those lines. But Metroid Prime 4 and Hyrule Warriors: The Imprisoning War, those would be my 2 picks. Like, I think those make the most sense to release on the Switch in 2024. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. What do you think of my theory? Do you think I'm right on the money that we are due for a new Omega Force game that is a crossover with Nintendo? Or do you think I'm insane? Do you think we're getting nothing this year? Or do you think we're getting something else entirely? I would love to get a conversation going down in the comments below. Of course, if you are new here and you enjoy Nintendo Switch news, reviews, discussions, all of that stuff, I would appreciate you subscribing. And until next time, folks, peace.